Record now.
This meeting is being recorded.
This meeting is being recorded. Okay, so for anybody who sees this and you're not watching this live, we are having a big old freaking party right now. And we are going to pull up this very kind gentleman's chart right now so we can explain what the heck we're looking at here. This right here is a natal chart. And the way it works is, so you're using Placidus system. Basically, the way this works is, I work with geocentric Western astrology. For those of you who are not aware, I work very specifically with geocentric Western astrology. And with that said, what this is basically a map. When Niffen was born, we could just put him right here in the middle of this thing, okay? And these little symbols right here, where I'm moving my mouse, sorry, my mouse is kind of hard to see, and especially if you guys are on a phone, but where I'm moving my mouse, these are the symbols for the celestial bodies. Like this right here is Pluto, where I'm moving my mouse. This right here is Saturn. This right here is the sun. This right here is Mercury. This right here is Uranus. This right here is Jupiter. Here's the moon. Okay, and when we go in the wheel a little way, these numbers right here, let's see if I can make that a little bigger. Yeah, there we go. Okay, these numbers right here are the degrees of the zodiac signs that these things were beaming through, okay? These teeny tiny little numbers, those are the minutes. Okay, on the outer part of the chart right here, these are the symbols for the zodiac signs that these things were beaming through when Niffen was born. So this right here is the symbol for the sign of Scorpio, technically called a glyph, okay? So here's the sun falling in to that sign of Scorpio. Okay, so the sun was beaming through the sign of Scorpio. When Niffen was born, here he is. He takes his first breath of air. And it, according to traditional Western astrology, this is all based on karma. Like he chose to come in with this. When he took his first breath of air, this is like his blueprint. This is what he came in with to experience this life and, you know, experience challenges and experience opportunities, experience harmonious situations. And I'll go a little deeper. I'll pull up a different chart just because I'm not going to be able to pull up transits using just this image here. But, you know, like this right here is Pluto. Let's see. Pluto was at 0 degrees Scorpio. Look at that. So here's the symbol for Scorpio. Again, here's the degrees, 0 degrees Pluto coming through the sign of Scorpio. Here's Saturn. You got a full-on stellium there, bro. Scorpio stellium. Okay, and then this right here, this is to represent the rising sign. Oh, I guess that with this system, this right here is the rising sign. I think I'm gonna have to pull up a different chart. So I'm more comfortable with the system. But so you're a Virgo rising. This right here is a symbol for Virgo. And he was the rising sign. If you haven't heard of a rising sign, what that represents, it's also called the ascended. That represents the persona. Okay. In fact, let's kind of digress and go back to the sun. The sun really does rule our inner being, like our sense of identity, who we are on the inside. So when he came through at 15 degrees Scorpio, that's his soul, that's his inner being. That's how it functions in the world. The sign of Scorpio is very, very deep. I totally see the Scorpio in you. It's a very deep energy. Scorpio is really like the sign of transformation. It's ruled by Pluto and Mars. Okay, now, and that is also slightly debatable. Ancient astrologers are going to say it's ruled by Mars. Modern astrologers are going to say it's ruled by Pluto. To me, it's ruled by both. And it makes perfect sense that it's ruled by both because Pluto in and of itself rules our psyche and our spiritual drive, where Mars rules our physical drive. Hey, there's my other buddy. Hold on just a second here, guys. We got Mehmet joining the team here.
Hey, Mehmet.
Yes, Mehmet. Say hello when you're ready. Okay, we'll wait till he's ready. So Mehmet's another astrologer. So back to Pluto and Mars. Mars rules our physical drive, and Scorpio is this very, very intense. In fact, Mehmet's a Scorpio. Scorpio is this very intense energy because it's ruled by Pluto and Mars, the ones that rule over our psyche, our physical drive, our spiritual drive, the influencer of transformation. In fact, the sign of Scorpio rules the entire excretory system. It's all about flushing things out to make room for more powerful beginnings. You may have heard Pluto being referred to as the planet of power, okay? And that's what makes Scorpio such a powerful energy. Okay, and then back up here, back up to the rising sign, that's the persona. That's the outward expression. That's how other people see Nathan. And that's coming through the sign of Virgo, which Virgo's quite different than Scorpio. Okay, Virgo is represented by the Virgin. It's all about purity. It's all about the sign of Virgo has a lot to do with harvest season and wanting everything to be perfect, and has a tendency to pay very close attention to detail. It's also the sign of being of service. Here's Nathan offering us, he's being of service by allowing us to take a peek at his chart here and go into things. It's also got a lot to do with our physical health. A lot of people have got a heavy dose of Virgo energy in their natal chart. They have a strong tendency to really want to take care of their health. Virgo rules the guts, basically, the intestines. And so it has a lot to do with that. Obviously our intestines are such an important part of our body. And the sign of Virgo has a lot to do with taking care of our physical body. But on that same flip side, if somebody's born with their sun in Virgo, and it's what I like to call harshly aspected, meaning if it's making some challenging connections with other celestial bodies in the chart, then it'll be the opposite. It'll be somebody who I have a very good friend who's a Virgo and takes terrible care of himself, his physical health. He's always of service, but he's got a challenge that goes on between his sun and Mars that it flips it the other way around. Okay, then we'll just drop in with the moon here real quick. So here's the symbol for the moon coming through the sign of Capricorn. Right there is the symbol for Capricorn, 28 degrees Capricorn. So that's almost anoretic. Okay, so the moon, she rules our emotions, how we process our emotions. It's like everybody, of course, is going to have a moon in their natal chart. And depending on what zodiac sign it was beaming through when they were born, is going to say a lot about how they process their emotions. Their intuition will have a influence on their moon placement. Okay, so the sign of Capricorn is quite practical. In fact, that's probably a really good moon placement with that Scorpio stellium to kind of maybe bring things to a little bit more of a practical level. The sign of Capricorn is very much, it's what we call the cardinal earth sign. So cardinal, anything that's cardinal, it means it got his force. It is an ambitious energy. The sign of Capricorn is very ambitious, but ambitious, it's like very much associated with being the boss, taking on authoritarian positions and being able to take control. And with that, it has to be practical. So the moon in Capricorn, people can have a tendency to bring their emotions to a practical level. But now we're going to get a little bit more complicated here, because when Nathan was born, Neptune was pretty darn close to the moon right here. Okay, this right here is Neptune, where I'm moving my mouse. That's a conjunction, meaning they're right next to each other. They're 1 degree away from each other. You can see his moon is at 28 degrees Capricorn, and his Neptune is at 27 degrees Capricorn.
Sag.
Oh, it's in Sag. Oh, you're right. I'm so used to a whole sign house system at this point. Okay, but your moon is in Sag?
Yeah, it's just the way the chart is, I think, but it shows that those little blue lines right there. It's right at the last.
I see. Okay, so here, that's really interesting. Oh, I see. Are these little lines right here? Is that to rep those slightly taller lines right there?
Yeah, the blue ones. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I take it back then. So, so this is what we're looking at right here, is something called a Placidus house system, which I'm not familiar with this setup. I'm familiar with using Placidus, but not this particular kind of setup. And so this system does, especially for new people, it could look a little confusing, because here's the symbol for Capricorn. Here's the symbol for Sagittarius. Okay. Now, these lines right here, these slightly taller lines, are showing that here's Neptune and here's the moon. They're actually falling into this space where it's the symbol for the sign of Sagittarius. So, okay, that changes things. So Sagittarius is the mutable fire sign. When I say mutable, it's very adaptable. All the mutable signs can have a tendency to be okay with changing, kind of adapting into new situations and hanging out with all different types of people. Sagittarius is a very optimistic energy, but it's also the sign of faith. It's the sign of wisdom. It's kind of the sign that carries ancient wisdom with it. Okay, so you carry that in your emotional like, what's the word I'm trying to think of here? That's how you process things in an emotional sense. And there might be, because it's a fire sign, there might be an initial response. Okay, kind of take a step back here. When somebody's born with their moon in Sagittarius, there can be, when something emotional happens, when they're like emotionally triggered, that fire energy can set it off, especially because it's mutable. So it can kind of bounce all over the place. But after processing it, the faith, the Sagittarius energy being associated with faith, it allows them to have faith in the situation. But then we have to take into consideration that, again, when he was born, Neptune was right next to the moon. Okay. Neptune loves being next to the moon because Neptune is flowy and rules our dreams and altered states of consciousness. And so that kind of modifies it and takes the fiery Sagittarius energy down a notch and makes it a little bit more dreamy, but also enhances the intuition significantly. Does that sound about right, Nathan?
Yeah. Yeah. And the technology aspect of Neptune, working with like kind of weird technology in the home.
Interesting, because it's your fourth house. Okay. So I want to pause this for a minute. Let me take that off. Let's stop the share there. Okay. Now let's see here. I'll check the chat. There you are. Okay. I want to introduce my friend Mehmet from Conscious Minds TV. Mehmet, will you take yourself off mute and say hello to everybody?
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all. I'm happy to be sharing this space with you. Look forward to connecting with you all.
Yeah.
Peace, love, and blessings.
So much for being here. Yes, Mehmet is another advanced astrologer. Mostly, you're so deep into the astrotheology. I want you to chime in because I'm going to go into like the mythology behind eclipses and talking about like Lord Vishnu and that sort of thing. And if you've anything to add, I don't care if you full on interrupt me, please do it.
Yeah.
Okay?
I mean, yeah, the only thing I kind of, when it comes to like eclipses, is that obviously I know it connects with the nodes.
Yeah.
And obviously that connects with Rahu and Ketu and that type of stuff, but I'll pass it back over to you.
Okay. Well, again, if anybody, Molly, Mirri, Hank, if any of you guys have anything to add to anything I say, again, I will be happy to be interrupted as long as it's, something, because I'm sure you guys got good things to add to this. Okay.
I definitely could say something. I mean, about this Neptune moon conjunction.
Yeah, you can.
I was just listening to one of my teachers yesterday saying that people with Neptune moon conjunctions, especially because it's superior. I mean, moon is separating, so therefore it's a superior ray from Neptune to the moon, that sometimes there can be a like kind of a lost quality emotionally, and the ability, because Neptune is both like the highest spiritual boon, but it's also like the biggest illusion. So oscillating between, is it spiritual or is it bullshit in the home, because it does fall in the fourth house, things that lift you up. So a lot of like, being lost or being, spiritual, or is the spirituality bullshit, that kind of reconciling that will have a lot to do with your sense of inner authority and discipline. And I mean, but then we've got also also practically a conjunction with Saturn on his sun too, and so
yes,
Saturn on your sun, Saturn's technically considered an outer planet, Jupiter and Saturn classically, and then we all know the traditional or the modern, outer planet. So, having that Saturn on your sun, that's huge too. Absolutely huge. It's just like throw out the rest. That's just going to dominate your life. And then having the Neptune on your moon is also going to be very dominant because it's your sun and your moon, and then considering like Saturn's out of sect, so it's very cold in the house of the second house, which represents your resources. First one being your body. Do you have a lot of discipline? Is something that I would wonder. And do you get lost in dreamy land? And could you use your discipline and your time and those kinds of things to help you, with how your emotions could maybe perhaps be lost. I think that was something that I would think about if I was reading the chart. And then also, you know, the fact that Pluto is in Scorpio and that stellium there, you know, that's intense. Sun, Saturn, Pluto, you know, the chart's down. So I think that, Mercury, and then the Mercury is so close. It could be all of it's just like in your face. I would actually wonder how psychological, shamanic, or abused, you know, that quality that went through your life. If you're my client, you know, I'd be like, so, you know, how does all that, because Saturn being out of sect in the cold, that can be, and then with Mars, who classically rules Pluto, being in the 12th house, that which leads you astray, you know, and out of sect in the heat, you know, with the mother or the purity energy, you know, like I would wonder about a lot of those kinds of things, because that's a pretty big deal, having like, you know, having that stellium, including Pluto, in the second house of your resources in your body. With Saturn there, it's like, it means you might govern other your other people's resources, or that it could be cold too. And having Mars be in your 12th house, you know, who rules over that stellium, with Pluto, who, you know, classic or not classic, but modern rules. It's quite a chart. You know, you do look very scorpionic too, you know, just looking at you from here. But yeah, that Neptune on the moon, like I said, one of my teachers was just talking about that yesterday, kind of saying that she feels for folks that have that, because sometimes they could be lost. You know, I don't know.
You know who else has it?
Who?
Pat in Sagittarius. So when he, you know, called me out on it not being in Capricorn, I was like, oh, I'm familiar with this one.
Yeah, that's true. It is.
That's really well said. Yeah, because Neptune is so dreamy. Neptune is so, I personally, if I was to have my moon in Sagittarius, I think I would prefer to have Neptune there. I will say though, it's probably a really good idea. I mean, I'm just saying, if that was in my chart, I would think that I need to be a little bit careful of falling into like addictive behaviors of any kind, not necessarily substance addiction, but rather of any kind, like getting sucked into things. But that's just kind of, I mean, Neptune will do that. I'm very familiar. I got Neptune on my ascendant, so.
Oh, wow. Do you?
Yeah.
I've heard about that. Yeah. And like Sagittarius, you know, it's like, it's so wise and philosophical, but also can be like brash and like sarcastic, you know, too, you know. And so there's like it's like, you know, every single thing that we're dealing with has like the quality that's sort of like the more developed, or the high quality or the low quality. It's all there. Which one are you going to choose? And I suppose like when we look into people's charts, or when we check out our charts, we're seeing like kind of the things that we move between. Are we going to bring out the high road of it? We have a tendency to be these certain ways, or to experience these certain things. You know, I've also heard that one of my teachers said that Saturn in Scorpio can be very just like see a lot of really hardcore things. Not that you have, you know, it's just that like hardcore, like abusive, seriously abusive, cruel, practically evil kind of stuff. And so, you know, that could be a tough signature, you know. And so, but you having, and then with the Neptune on your moon, you know, also like, because the moon's how you feel. So, you know, if you had to like go through those types of things, which I don't know, just like the more like seriously you take yourself, the more you go through the psychological transformation, that would be like paramount to you having, you know, psychological healing, as opposed to just like being damaged, you know, or hurt. And I'm just talking about what's in the chart, not that I'm trying to guess you or even ask you questions. Just saying.
Oh, that was well said. Good job. I completely understand everything you just said, and it definitely resonates. And that sign of Scorpio. Parents were addicts. Okay. He just put that in the chat that his parents were addicts growing up and taught me how to not be. Yeah. Good for you, Nathan. Yeah, that's totally all that, especially with like all that Scorpio energy, and then Saturn there taught you. Yeah. Good for you. Good call. Wow. Okay. So I think what I'm going to do, if everybody's cool with it, is kind of start talking about these eclipses.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's do this. Okay. So let me just pull up my notes so I don't forget to say anything. Cause I don't want to be totally, proper or anything, but I just don't want to forget some things to say. Okay. So let's start by talking about the mythology behind it's basically, I'm going to talk about the Hindu legend really. And maybe I should pull up the chart first. Let's do that. Let's pull up the chart so that I can show you what I'm talking about. Uh-oh, I closed it. Bear with me. Bear with me.
Oh yeah.
Erin,
Yo.
sorry, it's a bit late, but I just thought, we was talking about the moon and Neptune thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, something just came to me now, and I was just thought I'd add it because, like, for example, in the Kabbalah, in the Jewish tree of life, well, Neptune is the top and the moon is the bottom. So they're like the opposites or different, or the yin and yang of each other, if that makes sense. And it does make sense because they are both like connected to the waters and stuff like that. But one is kind of the waters above, which would be more spiritual emotions, which would be Neptune, obviously.
Yeah.
And then the moon would deal with more of your physical kind of emotions, because the moon kind of correlates with the earth.
Nathan,
but I see them as like different octaves.
Yeah, totally.
Because the moon is, because in like the order of the planets, because it goes moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. Well, moon is 1 and Neptune is 9. So it's the first and the last in the order as well.
Wow.
So you've got, and also they're sextiling each other by default in the chart, because obviously Neptune rules in Pisces and the moon exalts in Taurus. Yep. So there's a natural sextile between those 2 planets as well.
Yeah. Nathan just put in the chat, I don't know how to pronounce this, Keter and Malkoth?
Hester and Malkuth.
Keefer and Malkuth,
Yeah.
But the moon's actually Malkuth is like the earth, and the moon's Sephiroth is called Yesod. But
there's an image of that.
I didn't want to deflect, but
in George Soros's, I think that's his name, in the book Astrotherapy, he's got an image of that in there, of the planets with the tree, if anybody wants to look it up.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So thanks for that addition, Mehmet. That's great. Okay. Let's pull this up now. Let's go with this guy. Okay. So this, and by the way, if anybody's curious, the software that I work with is called Time Passages. And I really like the way that they have it set up. You can get a very, in fact, I think you could still get a free, if you just want to look at your own natal chart, if you're on a phone or like a iPad or tablet of sorts, if you just look up Time Passages as one word, I think you can get a free version just to look at your own chart. And then if you want to start, let's say you want to start looking at transits, then you have to pay like 99 cents to add it onto that, or you can do the whole shebang for, I think, $30 on a phone. It's expensive on a computer, but I really like Time Passages because it looks clean to me, but I also get it that like everybody's got their own thing, and not only that, but what I'm working with here is called a whole sign house system, which, and I'll go into this as well. The 2 most popular house systems are really Placidus and whole sign. I was originally trained through the American Federation School of Astrologers to use Placidus. And I was very comfortable with it, getting familiar with my own chart using Placidus, and then, my loved ones, and getting familiar. And then I went professional, still using Placidus, and really still completely have all the faith in the world as Placidus shows itself. But then when I went on to, after finishing the American Federation School of Astrologers, I went on to the Academy for Astrological Medicine, and, connected with other astrologers. They're like, you got to look at the whole sign. You got to just check it out. Start watching your transits with the whole sign house system. And I did. And my chart changes pretty drastically because I've got something called intercepted houses using Placidus. So my chart changes pretty drastically. Like things move into different houses when I switch into whole sign. But my brain just about exploded because I was like, dude, this is so exactly spot on with every single transit. And in my opinion, it's both. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, if you're like, well, she's talking, don't worry about it. That's okay. This is for people who are a little more advanced, but that's just my opinion. If Placidus works for you, work with it. If you've never used whole sign and you're used to Placidus, I do recommend just checking it out. But whatever, there's flexibility here. And a lot of this work is very, very mathematical, but it's also very intuitive. And I think it's just a lot of it's going to depend on the astrologer itself. But if anybody has, if you really desperately want me to, sorry, just looking at the chat here. Oh, good job, Sarah. If you desperately want me to switch into a different house system, I can do that. But okay, so what we're looking at here is looks very similar to Nathan's chart we were just looking at. It's the same, it's a zodiac, okay? So what this is, even though a natal chart would look just like this, but what this is I put in the time date of this upcoming eclipse. So for those of you who don't know, the eclipse is on April 19th, this coming Wednesday, and it peaks at 9:12 p.m. Pacific time. And so basically we put, again, I work with geocentric. So we put Earth right here in the middle, these guys right here. So here's Venus, here's Uranus, here's Mercury, here's the North Node, here's the Sun, here's the Moon, here's Jupiter. Okay. We go in the wheel a little way. These are the symbols for the zodiac signs that these things are beaming through at the time of this eclipse. Okay. And by the way, in case you're desperately curious what all these lines are in the middle of the chart, they're called aspects, but really what they are is like connections that were being made between celestial bodies, or will be being made between celestial bodies at the time of this eclipse. Like for an example here, here's the Sun and here's Pluto. And we see a few red lines here, but just one of these red lines, it's a square. It's approximately a 90-degree angle that will be going on between the Pluto and the Moon and the Sun. Okay. And that particular aspect is, can create some like internal tensions versus this guy right here. This is a trine, and that creates harmony. So that's usually the first question I get. What are all those lines in the middle of the chart? So I thought I'd go into that. But okay. So
now, Erin, I got a question. I don't remember my philosophy regarding this. Maybe Mirrors, but are we gonna recognize a T-square based off of the node? Or yeah, we're gonna recognize a T-square based off the node. So the Sun and the Moon, this eclipse is at the anaretic degree, literally in the 6th house.
Yeah. Well, it'll be in the 6th house for my location.
Okay.
Yeah. But so
with like
it'd probably be for you too. It'd probably be that it might be in the 7th for you because you're a little bit north of me. It might be in the 7th.
Okay, I see. All right. Mm-hmm.
But okay, so for beginners, let's here's the Sun, here's the Moon. They're both at, this right here is 29 degrees. They're both at 29 degrees. Here's the symbol for Aries, and these little numbers are 50 minutes. Okay, so anytime that we have a solar eclipse, we have to be having a new moon, and we have a new moon every single month. And what that means is, I'll go into what makes a new moon different than a solar eclipse. But so anytime we have a solar eclipse, we have to start with having a new moon, which means the Sun and the Moon have to be in the exact same spot, which they are right here. Okay. Here's the Sun, 29 degrees Aries, Moon at 29 degrees Aries. Okay. What makes it an eclipse, a solar eclipse, is it means one of the nodes, which this is a north node, this is a south node. One of the nodes, either one, has to be close to the Sun and the Moon. It's usually within 10 degrees. Sometimes it can get out to 15 degrees, okay, away. But that's what makes an eclipse happen. Anytime that we have a solar eclipse, it means the Sun and the Moon are in the same spot, and one of the nodes is right next to it. Okay, now the reason why eclipses go back into, since ancient times. And from my understanding, people really did go hide in caves when we would have an eclipse, or sometimes they would go out and break pots to help deter any kind of, it's like basically they're trying to break the pot instead of something on them breaking, whether it be something on their physical vessel or something around them, something emotionally breaking, something like that. And so that's really what got me intrigued. Like, okay, well, what the heck? Why were they so afraid of these eclipses? So that's why I'm going to talk about the mythology here. So this right here is the north node, and this right here is the south node. This is also, the north node is also referred to as Rahu. The south node is also referred to as Ketu. Okay. Now they are basically the dragon. The north node, Rahu, is the dragon's head. The south node, Ketu, is the dragon's tail. And from my understanding, in the real traditional story, it was actually a demon. Okay, this was a demon's head and a demon's tail. Now, what the story is, what the mythology is that Lord Vishnu was going around and handing out what they called the Amrita, the potion for eternal life. But this potion for eternal life was only supposed to be for certain gods. Okay. Well, what happened was this demon came and stole the potion, came and stole the Amrita. But then the sun and the moon, as the archetypes, they caught the demon. They caught him with the potion. He already drank some of the potion, but they caught him. The sun and the moon did. So they brought the demon back to Lord Vishnu, and they're like, hey, we got this guy who's, drinking our Amrita. And as punishment, Lord Vishnu cut the demon's head off. Okay. So this is the dragon's head, or the demon's head, and this is the dragon's tail. Again, over time, from my understanding, it was converted into being a dragon, but I think in the original story it was a demon. So with that said, these Rahu and Ketu, the north and south node, they're considered enemies of the sun and the moon. Like, obviously, if they busted him with the Amrita and turned him in, and that's why the demon got his head cut off, that's why they're considered enemies of the sun and the moon. But, okay, that sounds terrible. Sounds like the nodes are just horrible, but they're really not. They're just like Saturn. Saturn is described as like the bringer of death, but he's also the bringer of wisdom. Saturn, is a kind of an old grouchy kind of energy that comes through, but we need him. Okay. Just like we need these nodes. In fact, it is said that they basically carry our soul from lifetime to lifetime. The north node, well, actually, let's start with the south node. In somebody's natal chart, okay, if this was somebody's natal chart, this could totally be, a baby could be born at the time of this eclipse. But if that's the case, okay, the baby's south node would be over here. Here's a symbol for Scorpio. The baby's south node would be in Scorpio, 4 degrees Scorpio. Baby's north node would be at 4 degrees Taurus. They're always opposite each other. They have to be. And by the way, they're not planets. Okay, what they are is the moon has an ecliptic that she goes around. Okay, and on that ecliptic, one end sits the north node, the other end sits the south node, and they have to be exactly opposite each other all the time. And by the way, the word node actually comes from the word knot. It's Latin. Okay, so the north, well, again, let's go back to the south node. Let's start there. So if this was a baby that was being born at the time of this eclipse, the south node over here would be said to be, or have rulership over that baby's past. Okay, and if you entertain the possibility of previous lifetimes and reincarnation, then this would be basically described as this baby already mastered this energy of the sign of Scorpio, 4 degrees Scorpio, from a previous lifetime, and will kind of come into this lifetime being very familiar with the sign of Scorpio. But as they go throughout life, according to traditional Western astrology, and I could get into the difference between the Vedic perspective and the Western perspective, but if we have time for that, I'll do that. But according to Western astrology, it is encouraged that we lean into our north node. So this baby, if went to a Western astrologer, will be encouraged. Okay, yeah, you already got this Scorpio energy down. Let's try to take on the qualities of what the North Node is coming through. Sometimes the North Node is referred to as the destiny, okay, which I'm okay with that, but there's so much more to it. It's not just the destiny. It's also this North Node rules over materialism versus the South Node is more like detachment and spiritualism. Okay, so these nodes, let's see, did I cover everything I wanted to about that? So just to kind of clarify here, if this was a person's natal chart, this South Node would basically become like a drain point. This is where energy would go out versus the North Node. That is where energy comes in. And I always describe it to my clients as it's like you're on a surfboard. You're surfing in the ocean and you want both feet on the surfboard. You want your front foot facing towards the North Node, your back foot, you know, kind of leaning away from the South Node. So you're surfing towards the North Node, but you don't ever want to entirely leave behind this South Node. It's kind of like where your instincts are. Okay. And you don't want to take both, you want to leave at least, I mean, you definitely want to leave both feet on the surfboard so you don't lose balance. It's like you got to kind of find a healthy balance between the two. But it is encouraged that we lean towards our North Node. Again, if we have time, I'll go back and cover more of the Vedic stuff, but I'm a Western astrologer, so we're going to stick with that.
Next question, Erin.
Please.
So how do you determine which one is the South and the North Node?
That's an excellent question. So they kind of look like headphones to me. The North Node looks like proper headphones going like, you know, and then the South Node is always going to be upside down. They're the exact same symbol, but the South Node is like upside down headphones. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. Thank you. Yes.
And I do see some stuff in the chat. Let me just check here. Judith references difference. Yes, Sarah. Okay, and the books, Sarah's bringing up the Judith Hill's books. Again, in case you missed it, it is eclipses and you, and also the lunar nodes, your chart, I'm only seeing the side of it. What is it, Molly?
I forgot. I'm sorry.
Well, you just look up Judith Hill and look up the lunar nodes. I'm only looking the side of the book. I can't see the whole front of it, so I can't read it.
Sarah, thank you.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so oh geez, there are all kinds of good stuff here. I'm gonna get totally sidetracked if I pay too close attention to this.
Can I throw something in about the North and South Node and their meaning?
Yep.
So going back to Rahu and Ketu, it was sort of like, and then the North Node being like the headset, or, you know, it's like a lot of times, you know, we run after our North Node because we're getting these ideas and all this influx of energy comes in. It's like where we want to go, where we want to go, where we want to go. But also, like you were saying, Erin, you cannot get too far away from your South Node. They have to come together, and that's sort of like the dichotomy between this one of the dichotomies between it is like you think you got to go here, you're getting all this energy to go here, but if your dragon head runs off and leaves the tail behind it, the whole point is to stay connected, because you run away from your like grounded self, thinking you need to go here, but that can mess you up too. So it's sort of like, you know, hearing the transmissions but grounding it into the bowl, like, because the South Node is sort of like a bowl. It contains everything that was and that you have, and you don't want to fall back into it and not follow the North Node energy that you have, which is like your secret path of where you're going. But also to run after that is just like the chasing the Amrita. You know, you can get so high on it too, but they have to stay in balance there. And I think that that's something that people have to recognize about their North and South Node. You know, it's like, don't get stuck in what is so easy because you've done it lifetime after lifetime. You know, reach forward, but don't run off and think that that's all you're about, listening to like the transmissions, but not include your South Node, you know?
Yeah, totally. Exactly. That's exactly how it should be done, in my opinion. And I will just touch on this real quick. Okay. So in Jyotish or Vedic astrology, the nodes are the same thing. This is the dragon's head. This is the dragon's tail. The Rahu, Ketu. The North Node is where energy comes in. The South Node is where energy goes out. In Vedic astrology or Hindu astrology, from my understanding, they don't encourage people to develop the qualities of their North Node, because that's considered more of a more materialistic side of things, versus the South Node is detachment and spiritualism. And I totally support that. If that works for anybody, okay, go with it. But in my opinion, if the South Node is what we already did, if it's our past, it makes sense to me that we'd want to move, like go towards the North Node and develop those qualities. I mean, honestly, that's the number one thing that I tell every single new client is if you know, I always record the session and I send them the recording, but in case they ever never go back and watch it, I always encourage them, if there's one thing you walk away from here, you know, remembering today, I encourage you to look into or try to, you know, focus on the qualities of whatever, you know, if this was my client and their North Node is in Taurus, I give them all the keywords, the best keywords to describe the sign of Taurus, and say, that's what I would encourage you to go after. Again, don't leave the South Node behind. But I often even encourage people to just look into that sign, feel what feels right to you and go after that. So there's that. But going back to like what an eclipse is, with a solar eclipse, so this North Node, because this is a North Node or a Rahu eclipse, what that means is the energy's coming in. Okay, here's the sun, here's the moon. And by the way, anytime we have a new moon, it means it's new beginnings, because I like to describe this as the sun is the father, the moon is the mother in Western astrology. And they come together every single month. The sun takes a whole year to go around this thing, versus the moon goes around here every single month. So as the moon's boogieing around this thing every single month, she catches up to the sun, they meet in the same spot, and that's when we have a new moon. And they're coming together to make a baby, an energetic baby. And I picture it through this toroidal field that just comes out every time that they meet together in the sky. And that's what creates it's like the perfect time for new beginnings, for setting intentions to work with that growth. Okay. And by the way, I kid you not, I can't believe what I have manifested into my life by the last 7 years now. Every single new moon, writing down in my journal, what do I want to manifest that's, you know, in relation to the zodiac sign that the new moon is in. And basically what happens is over the next 6 months, like this is a new moon in the sign of Aries. Here's a symbol for Aries. 6 months from now, we're going to have a full moon in the sign of Aries. That would be the peak of that growth cycle. That's the time to honor the growth that you've experienced. Okay, so it's just because this is a solar eclipse doesn't take away from the fact that it's still a new moon. It's still a time to manifest new beginnings. And personally, I'm super excited about this one because, so this is in the sign of Aries, okay? Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, okay? It's the cardinal fire sign with strength. And when I say cardinal, again, that means force. It's got fire, so it comes with energy. It's represented by the ram that can ascend great heights, okay? It's an aggressive energy. I mean, there's so many wonderful things to say about this. It's the first sign. It's a sign of self. Okay. Now, with that said, usually we only get one new moon in each zodiac sign per year, but every once in a while we're going to get 2 in the same zodiac sign. Well, this year we get 2. We already had a new moon at 0 degrees Aries. Now we're getting another one at 29 degrees Aries. So if you haven't already been working with this energy, I so strongly encourage you to write down what you want to manifest, new beginnings that, you know, relate to this sign of Aries. How do you want to grow in the ways of a warrior? Okay. And within yourself, because it's in the sign of self. So it's like we got 2 opportunities this year to manifest new beginnings related to the sign of Aries. But the second one is coming through at 29 degrees and 50 minutes. That's just 10 minutes away from being in the sign of Taurus. What that means is this is extremely what we call anaretic. It's the very, very end of the sign of Aries would start right here. Okay. This is the very, very end of it. And that's aggressive energy. I mean, it's sometimes referred to as the danger zone, but that's okay. I focus on the optimism of everything, Sagittarius rising. And it's such a grand opportunity, even if I think of it as extra aggressive, extra warrior energy. Go after it. What do you want to go after? Okay. But then we take into consideration that the North Node is right here. And even though this North Node is in the sign of Taurus, okay, there's still, okay, again, there's 30 degrees in each zodiac sign. Like basically this is what is called a cusp, this little line right here. That's to represent the very end of the sign of Aries. And then we move into the sign of Taurus. Okay, this right here is the sign of Taurus. Taurus comes right after Aries. So this North Node is at 4 degrees at 1 minute Taurus. This is basically 30 degrees right here. It's 29 and 50 minutes. Okay, so they're 4 degrees away from each other. Even though they're in different zodiac signs, they're still very close together. So what's trippy about this eclipse, which is, it happens, but it's not totally common, that we're going to have the node and the sun and the moon in different signs. So then we take into consideration this Taurus energy that's literally coming in. And it's like basically, as soon as the eclipse hits, you know, as soon as, and by the way, this won't be visible to anywhere in the United States that I'm aware of. I don't think it's going to be visible in the UK either. I think it's south of the UK. Does anybody know this, where the solar eclipse is going to be visible? No? Okay. Well, when we have the eclipse, when the sun's blacked out, our connection to source is cut off. That's the dragon's head. In fact, oh, I should have found, I wonder if I've got it somewhere saved on my computer. I should look for it. Like ancient statues of the dragon, the golden dragon's head swallowing up the black, I don't even know how to describe it really, but there's ancient statues of Rahu, the dragon head, the dragon's head swallowing up the sun. Okay, that's what happens. He swallows up the sun. Our connection to source is cut off momentarily. But then as soon as the eclipse is coming to an end and we start to see the sun come through again, and by the way, I would never encourage anybody to go out there and expose yourself to eclipse energy. I don't care what kind of eclipse it is. There's very certain ways to work with it. And if it's in perfect alignment with your own transit and charts, maybe, but I don't encourage it at all. But then as soon as this eclipse ends, as soon as the minutes pass and we can see the sun come back, we receive a surge of energy. It's like the lights went out and then boom, they come back on with force because it's the North Node. That's where the celestial energy is coming in. Okay, the sign of Taurus, real quick here. Sign of Taurus it's very much the sign of money, material possessions, values. It can also have a lot to do with consumption, as in like purchasing things, but also consuming food. In fact, the sign of Taurus rules basically the mouth, and it can have a tendency to value really good quality food and luxurious things, that sort of thing. And so we are still receiving that. There's a lot going on with money in the world. Oh my gosh. For those of you who, I'm really sorry if this goes over some of your heads, but for those of you who haven't heard me talk about this and you know what I'm talking about, it's just been fascinating. Back in 2022, here's the North Node, here's Uranus right here, which Uranus influences very abrupt technological things. It's brings things like technological advances or abruptness. Spasmodic sort of electrical energy comes from Uranus. And back in 2022, we had Uranus and the North Node right next to each other when we were having, I can't remember if it was a lunar eclipse maybe. Anyway, it was one of the eclipses. And again, the sign of Taurus rules money. Uranus influences technological changes. And right then, right as that eclipse happened, boom, the cryptocurrencies just crashed. Especially there was a coin called Terra Luna. I think it was a total lunar eclipse that was it was just a trip to watch all that. But I personally think that the digital currencies are going to be on the rise. I mean, there's so much that's a whole nother can of worms. But I know there's a lot of conspiracy theories, possibly conspiracy facts around that stuff that, maybe some government getting their sticky fingers and screwing it up for everybody. Because I personally want the decentralized cryptocurrencies to manifest. That's my own opinion, but maybe some genius will be able to figure it out someday. And Hank, feel free to chime in on that if you want. Molly.
I want to say that, right now, Venus is in Mercury's sign, Mercury is in Venus's sign, right? And there's right now and applying, there's a square with Venus and Saturn and Saturn is in the dominant, it's a
Is everybody still there? All right, let me pause this recording. I don't know if you guys are experiencing this, but things just slowed down on my end, right as we're talking about technology. Okay, there we go. Are you guys back? Sarah Wing says she's good. Okay, am I the only one that's having this issue? You guys can hear me okay? Let me know in the chat if you, oh, that's what happened. My internet switched over to a different one. Darn it. Okay. I don't know if this is happening for you guys. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the recording real quick here. I'm going to stop the share and pause the recording.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay. I loved what you were saying though, Molly. I loved what you were saying.
Yeah, I was talking about the mutual, Mercury is the trickster and it's in the house of contractual relationships, which is oftentimes about, money and contracts, relationships that you can't just throw off. They're there. And Mercury, the trickster, the money, the communicator is there, and so is that North Node, like, oh, where we want to go. And it's in, Venus, the sign of Taurus, and Venus is in, Mercury sign of Gemini right now, having Saturn contract her with a square. And so Venus is in the house of other people's money, so to speak, life, death, karma, 8th house. So that is interesting to see how, things are going to probably try to blow up in the crypto, and we'll see how that goes. They got a contraction. Also, Venus exalts in Pisces, which is where Saturn is squaring her from. So having the mutual reception between Mercury and Venus, which is both about money and communication, and then having the square put on to Venus from Saturn, which is limitation, and order, in the 5th house of, your resources. I think it's appropriate that we've got we've got Scorpio in the 1st house right now, because, that's where the nodes are. And the South Node is like pooping it out physical there, so you can kind of see that there's that relationship where there could be with Uranus, revolution. It's like, but is it good? Is it good? And I mean, yeah, the great thing about, crypto is that it is, the blockchain thing and the transparency and the decentralization. The bad thing about it is just one step removed of another slave labor, another. And so we'll have to, that's interesting, we'll see how that, turns out, but that's a lot. It's in people's personal, having Saturn be in people's 5th house of their own court, their own freedom, their own good times, or else their mother in some senses, you would say. And I mean, what's our ultimate mother? The resources, and then Uranus, being all bzz, 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 going big and everything, revolution. But it's like, we'll see how that works out with this eclipse, because also where the sun and the moon are eclipsing right now is in the 6th house at the anaretic degree. And remember what Judith Hill says is like, that's a protection place. Mm-hmm. Like when you have something at that that in the 6th house, at that one spot, at that anaretic degree, there's a special protection there. So I'm just like hoping that, we're all going to kind of get a lesson about the quality of our resources, and our bodies and the human nature, and protecting our assets and protecting our things. And, in the 6th house, being like, your indentured servitude, or your work that you have to do, or employees, people that work for you, is that 6th houses, or your own indentured servitude where you have to do the work. It's also your ill health, so I think like, plus with that Saturn squaring on Venus, I'm just wondering if people are going to be realizing some lessons about what's really valuable, what's really important, and where, all that glitters is not gold. And that's Neptune, being there in that 5th house, So we will see. I think it's also interesting that this is the second new moon in Aries, right as we have just come into the spring equinox, which is Aries. So it's like this renewal point with these double new moons in Aries. This like renew. We've got the protection in the workhouse because it's at that anaretic 1 critical degree. And Jupiter's there wanting to go big. And, I think hopefully with Venus being in the sign of Gemini, which is very heady, like Venus is a very earthy, and she's so there's an opposition between the earth and the air, and it's just like with Uranus being there going, bzz, bzz, and Venus being in an air sign, I'm hoping a lot of people are going to start actually realizing what's valuable in their personal lives, in their own bodies, in their court of good times. And, not get the delusional, but more of like the grounded kind of, I'm seeing it in my own life. And we've got also, Mars is up there super hot, in like the 9th house. Like it's like Mars is the hottest planet. It likes to be at the bottom. So it is totally out of sect right now, really, really hot, zooming forward with like all this vision and stuff like that in the 9th house and long distance travel. It's like, hopefully we'll all keep our feet on the ground and, kind of like recognize what our resources are, from money to our health to our families to like the higher qualities, because the nodes are changing. This is like the first time we're getting kind of like
yeah. This is the last solar eclipse we'll be having with the North Node in Taurus for 18 years. And then we will be having another lunar eclipse in a couple weeks where the North Node will still be in Taurus. But basically, because like where you're going with this, back to the digital currencies and the values. And I really do have a sneaking suspicion that over these next 3 or 4, okay, so the North Node's going to be in Taurus until around July 20th. I can't remember the exact date. But that's basically because that sign of Taurus has such a strong influence. Like the sign of Taurus in and of itself loves to be grounded, loves to be stable. It's the fixed the earth sign that wants to be stable. All the earth signs are, tend to function with a little more practicality and stability, but especially the fixed earth sign. But it's also this sign that represents our value system. And I'm not talking about money, like greed for money. I'm talking about understanding the value of working hard to obtain something that is of real value, something that's like conductive, like precious metals, something like that. And basically from between now and July 21st, we're receiving this opportunity to recognize the value of those things. But the digital stuff comes in while Uranus is still going through the sign of Taurus. But exactly what you're saying, Molly, that like, I really do hope, and of course it's going to be unique to everybody. Everybody's on their own trip, and to be able to apply this to your own chart and see what area of your life it's specific. I will go into that, but I do strongly, I manifest that people understand the value of, I think it was Nathan put in the chat, like, excuse my French, but the fiat currency, everything, it's just bullshit. Excuse me for saying so. But even paper money that we're working with, I know people are saying, that we should we should only use cash, that sort of thing. Well, in reality, if something really bad goes down, that's just a piece of paper. There's no real value for, paper money. But something that is of value, something, like I'm looking at all my gemstones, like, they hold value. Precious metals hold value. That sort of thing is what I do hope to see manifest while this North Node finishes up in there.
You know what else holds value? More value than anything, and is before anything manifest physical actually comes to be a symbol of value, is respect. and your word and your ability to control yourself and your ability to have discipline and your ability to, yes, put yourself forward and first, but not at the expense of others in any way, shape, or form. You know, and I think that a lot of us are going to stumble and fall, and we will rise as quick as our respect is there, our ability to have compassion, our ability to have forgiveness, our ability to turn ourselves around on a dime to do what's right. That is really the real value. And in a mind over matter world where nothing is really here but what we create and what comes back to us and how we handle that in the moment, that is the real value. That is the real currency, you know. And I think that we're all going to have a little stumble and fall, and how quick we pick back up and start to fly from that will really literally be on how much we honor truth and other bodies. Before new ideas, we take care of what we're already taking care of. We take care of the bodies and then what our responsibilities are. And then once that's grounded, South Node, that's when we can move forward into implementing our ideas. But when we run off to implement our ideas before we take care of our responsibilities, that's out of balance, and that's not going to fly. That's not going to fly. That's going to hit. It's going to hit. It's going to hit. And I think that I feel like most of us are going to have some sort of little hit, and whether we're going to hit that and go back up, bounce, or whether we're going to hit that and stay down, I really feel like that's going to have to be whether or not we are in harmony with higher law, period. I mean, you know what? If you were my client in astrology, literally, you would probably get sick of hearing me say that. But this is really like a greater law and a higher equation for no matter what. Everything out here is secondary to how we put these things together in our mind over matter kind of reality. And I mean, it's like in this world, well, I don't want to go on and on and on, but so that's what I'm kind of seeing here, you know. And it's all going to happen in our homes, in our personal court, in our private life, where we get to do whatever we want and not answer to everybody. That's where we're going to get the hit. Are you literally doing the right thing? Are you going to go straight up to the top and project your reality because you are just like so like on point, or not? Up to you, you know.
Molly, you should put, and anybody else, by the way, Molly, put your contact in the chat in case anybody wants to get a reading from you, either your email or however you want people to be able to contact you.
I could do that.
Okay.
I'm on vacation right now, everybody, and I got to get over to my mom's house. Not vacation, but I'm at my family's, and so I'm in my brother's apartment, and basically I'm gonna just say that I am gonna switch over to my phone and drag my stuff out, blah 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 blah, and I'll probably turn off my vision, that way you don't have to see me everything. But I'm still here with you. I love you so much, Erin, and I'm so happy to see the people here that I know, and I've never really hung out with very much with you, Mehmet, ever. So, but anyways, yeah, I'm getting ready to start transitioning, and that's why. And so,
thank you for everything that you have applied to this. It's been wonderful. And enjoy your family. Love you, Molly.
Love you too.
Thanks, Molly.
Contact in there.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll put my contact in. Thanks.
Okay, so kind of taking a step back here. Does everybody feel like they kind of have an idea as to how these nodes work? Because they're really the most important part of an eclipse. Understanding, basically, to simplify it, energy comes in through the north node, it goes out through the south node. I will, might as well, if we've got time, in case I don't want to bore anybody, but we can also, if we've got time, go into the lunar eclipse that'll be in a couple of weeks, because that's going to involve the south node. But I mean, really, what it all comes down to is when we have a solar eclipse, any solar eclipse, it can come through. In fact, next year we'll have the solar eclipse where the north node will actually be in the sign of Aries, and the south node will be up here in the sign of Libra. But it doesn't matter if you know we're having a solar eclipse. You can look up on any astrology website and see where the north node is. You're going to see the sun and the moon right next to either the north node or the south node. If it's the north node, you know we're receiving a surge of energy. If it's the south node, it's taking something away from you. Going back to maybe some of you might have been late joining the call, but that's what I was talking about earlier when I was talking about the process of having to say goodbye to my mother. It was a hardcore south node eclipse right on my moon. And not only that, but it was in the house of death. And I just watched this stuff unfold over and over. But does anybody want me to kind of re-go over anything? You feel like you kind of got the gist of things here? Everybody good?
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense.
Erin, I was just going to add, if that's okay, just about, like the South and North node, how in the chart, the North node corresponds with Gemini and the South node corresponds with Sagittarius, because that's where they both rule. So obviously you said that the South node would correspond with like kind of your past life. So that's like your experience. And obviously we know South node connects with Sagittarius, which is about wisdom and being a teacher. Whereas the North node connects with Mercury, which is about being a student. So I'm just kind of adding that dynamic to what you've already explained. So could you hear me?
Yeah. I can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. So what Mehmet is talking about, and by the way, I encourage you guys to go check out his YouTube channel, Conscious Minds TV. He puts out really good quality stuff. Okay. This right here is a symbol for Sagittarius, or this is technically called a glyph, by the way. All these little things are technically called glyphs, but slip up and call them symbols. Okay. So here's this glyph for the sign of Sagittarius. That's Sagittarius is a fire sign. It's red right there to show it's a fire sign. So Sagittarius, we were talking about it earlier with Nathan's moon and Neptune in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is it's a sign of faith. And it's the sign that, has this ability to have faith. Oh, hold on a second here. Molly's joining back in with her phone. Okay. So Sagittarius is really this sign of wisdom and the teacher, okay, versus over here, opposite that is Gemini, which is the student who's always like trying to pay attention to the facts and learn from every little situation. Like, again, to kind of make sense of this, Sagittarius is faith-based, and basically Gemini is the opposite of that. And so the South node really kind of belongs to the Sagittarius energy, yeah? Right, Mehmet?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the North node, yeah. Oh, now I can't hear you.
Yeah, so like the South node corresponds with the Sagittarius energy, and then the North node is the Geminian energy. So I guess from like a solar eclipse, you will learn something, and maybe like with the like lunar eclipse, it will kind of maybe tie back into more of like the wisdom teaching side. So yeah, I just wanted to add that into what you were saying, because like how each like planet rules a particular sign or exalts in a particular sign. I know that Gemini is to do with Rahu, and Sagittarius corresponds with Ketu.
Yeah, that does make sense. What a trip. Okay, so what I could do next.
Hey, can I say something about that, pretty please?
Yeah.
Which is, I've also heard about Rahu and Ketu corresponding with Sagittarius and Gemini. And, but I don't think that that's an ancient astrology tenet, and I'm not sure where it comes from. Do you remember, Mehmet?
Do you know what? I actually have, I think it actually does come from an Indian perspective, because I did a video about this on about like gods and planets on like the Syncretism Society. I did a video about this, and there was actually a connection with Mercury and Rahu, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. What I'll do, I'll go back into my notes while you are talking, and then I'll read it out, or I'll read it and then I'll remember it.
Thank you so much. You're so kind. Of course, it goes back to Indian, of course, right? So But you want to know what's really interesting? This is kind of the one thing, because I've always thought that too and said that too, and it makes perfect sense. But you know what's interesting is that Sagittarius, you know, in the Adam Cadmon, it's like that would be the 11-5 axis, right? And isn't that true? It would be the 11-5 axis, Gemini, Sagittarius, or no? Sagittarius would be like you guys know what I'm talking about?
No.
Sorry. That's okay. I feel like I'm at least what I used to think, and I'm not sure right now, and I'm trying to get my dog together and everything. But
Sister, you're talking about the 3rd and 9th axis, I think.
Right,
because Gemini is 3 and Sagittarius is 9. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I am. Somehow I had it one time. I had this figured out, and I can't remember why, but that it had to do with the 11-5. And I guess my point, I can't really make it now, so because I kind of forgot what I was talking about. Sorry about that, but I just remember for some reason associating it with how the gates are the 2-8 axis, and then the opposite of the 2-8 axis would be the 11-5 axis, and like corresponding it that way. I'm not sure why anymore, so it doesn't really matter. Sorry.
You're good.
I'll have to remember that. Thank you, Mehmet, though, for putting that up in the chat, your class. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. See, that's another thing that's so awesome about astrology is that there's so many different like routes you can go down. You could go into astrotheology, you could go down modern astrology, you can go into ancient astrology, you can go into medical astrology, you can go into psychological astrology, you can go into financial astrology. There's all, and so to have a bunch of people who all study astrology and all get together and just like, oh, let's bounce ideas off of each other. And you could literally study astrology every single day for the rest of your life and still not even know half of it. That's what it all comes down to. It's infinite. It's the study. And that's why I love it. One of the reasons I love it so much is because my brain needs constant stimulation. And with astrology, I get that. But okay, so the next thing I was going to do, let me just look at the chat here real quick. And I'm really sorry if you've asked me anything in the chat. Thank you, Lisa, for being here. If I missed anything, and not only that, but I think I accidentally direct messaged one person when I meant to send something to the whole team. Anyway, I'm new to this, like, again, messaging this many people at once. But if you put anything in the chat that was meant for me and I missed it, please feel free to just take yourself off mute at any time and ask me, because I don't want anybody to feel like I'm ignoring them. But what I was going to do next is go into how to see which area of your life this specifically manifests for you. Do you guys feel ready for that? Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sweet. Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like probably quite a few of you people know, and I certainly don't want to bore anybody, so I'll try to do it in a sense where there's something new, I mean, for beginners and for the advanced. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take, is there anything else I want to cover on this? Oh, before I do that, actually, let me finish some things up here. Well, I still got this chart pulled up. So again, this is the chart for the solar eclipse is coming up this Wednesday. And actually it's on the 20th for people over, on the East Coast or the UK or something like that. But, here's the sun and here's the moon at 29 degrees Aries. Now I'm in Santa Cruz, California. Okay. It says it on the chart right here. If you take the time to look this up in your location, if you live basically any other place in the world, you're still going to see the sun and the moon at 29 degrees Aries, and you're going to see the North Node at 4 degrees Taurus, but they might be in other parts of this circle. These little things that look like a slice of pie, this is where we're going to go into this next. We're going to talk about the houses. These things that look like a slice of pie, they're called the houses. And for some people, let's see, over in the East Coast, the sun would be down here. It would still be in the sign of Aries. Basically, just the whole chart would move. Because the way it works is, in my location, the sun will be just under the horizon. Okay. It will be, I mean, 9 o'clock, it should be a little further down here. Maybe this thing isn't 100% accurate. Oh, it's not showing itself 100% accurate through the image, but it's calculated correctly. Anyway, when the sun rises every single day, if you pull up a chart, in fact, maybe that's what I'll do. I'll pull up a chart to show you guys this, but every single day, the sun rises right here. It goes up in the sky right around, if somebody's born around noon in their natal chart, the sun's going to be somewhere up here. And then the sun starts to go down. If somebody's born around 6, 7, depending on what time of year it is, if they're born right as the sun is setting, their sun is going to be somewhere over here. Okay. If they're born at nighttime, the sun's going to be down here, like at midnight, the sun's going to be down here. It's a night chart is what it's called. So with that said, in case you take the time to look this up on your own and you're at a different location, you're like, what the hell? It's totally different. It's still going to be at 29 degrees Aries, but it will be in a different spot. Okay. So there's that. All right, let's do this. The chat. Heather here in the Mountain Time, Canada, I have 44 Aries 12 and 47 Aries 10. Oh, okay. Sorry, reading the chat, you guys. Okay, I try not to get too wrapped up. Okay, there we go. I'm going to pull up a different chart here. What I did was I just completely made up this is nobody's chart. This is an anonymous sunshine, anon sunshine. Okay, this would be just somebody's a fake person's chart. Okay, now we know that the sun and the moon are coming through the sign of Aries, and we know that the North Node is coming through the sign of Taurus. So if you're looking at your natal chart, all you got to do to see which area of your life, and by the way, these areas of your lives more than likely already been affected pretty drastically because we've already had eclipses all throughout the year of 2022 through the sign of Taurus and the sign of Scorpio. But all you got to do is look at your natal chart and see which house in your natal chart, meaning which slice of pie, the sign of Aries and the sign of Taurus come through. Okay. And you do need to know, I should have mentioned this earlier, you do need to know approximately what time you were born to be able to calculate that amount of accuracy. To be clear, if you're because I do know there's quite a few people on here that are totally new to this stuff. If you've never even seen a natal chart before, I do encourage you to either get the Time Passages app or go to astro.com or just go to your search engine and type in free natal chart calculation. And I work with Western astrology. You usually don't need to put that in though, because it's probably the most commonly used, at least in this part of the world. And then it'll take you to a website. And you'll have to enter your birth date, your birth time, and your birth location to be able to get this kind of calculation. But if you don't know what time you were born, first of all, there are ways to, I have 3 clients, and one is a very well recognized individual who had muscle testing done to figure out what time they were born, 3 of them. And all 3 of them I can see in their chart. I'm like, this makes perfect sense. All 3 of them. I think that whoever did your muscle testing hit the nail on the head. Okay, so there's that. If you don't know what time you were born, you still can get a chart pulled up. You're still going to be able to see that your sun, what zodiac sign it's going to come through. You're still going to be able to see where the moon is. You're still going to be able to see where Jupiter is. You're going to be able to see what zodiac sign and what degree they're in without knowing what time you were born, but you won't be able to see which slice of pie these things land in your natal chart for you. And there's a natural chart, there's a sunrise chart, there's all different, you can put your moon as your rising sign if you don't know what time you were born. There's all different ways that you can do it. And please, if you have any questions, and by the way, because I'm so grateful for you guys being here, anybody who's here today and you want to schedule an astrology reading, I'm going to give you 30% off because I'm super excited that you guys are all here.
Erin?
Yeah.
Can I ask? So, like for example, if someone doesn't know their chart at the time they're born, right? And just say, for example, they have a stellium in Aries, right? Would that then kind of automatically just give them, obviously I'm assuming that would just automatically give them a lot of first house energy anyway. So you could kind of connect it that way, if that makes sense.
Oh, okay.
Because obviously Aries by default connects with the first house, right?
Yeah.
So like, for example, if you looked at someone's chart, but they didn't know the time, but they had a stellium in Aries, then you would see kind of that you could kind of associate that with the first house anyway. So is that how you would do it, for example?
That's usually what I do. I use is usually called a sunrise chart. You can also use something called a natural chart. Okay, and what Mehmet's talking about right now. Okay, so this anonymous sunshine here was born. What did I put in here? I put that he was born in San Francisco, California at 12:40 p.m. So the sun's up here, because if he was born at 12, the sun would be right here. Okay, he was born at 12:40, so it's a little further along here. And I also feel like I should show Placidus, just for those of you who are super curious. But okay, there's the sun right there. We know that Anon was born at 14 degrees Pisces. This right here is a symbol for Pisces. Poor Anon. Jeez, this poor guy is probably a drug addict. I say that because the sun is right next to Neptune in the sign of Pisces. But anyway, that's an astrology thing. I say that because the sign of Pisces loves to be in altered states of consciousness. And please don't get me wrong, if you're a Pisces and you've never done a drug in your life, there's so much more to the natal chart. But I'm Pisces myself, and I can tell you for sure, Pisces likes to be in altered states of consciousness. And it gets really amplified when somebody's sun is right next to Neptune, because Neptune rules the sign of Pisces, and that's what makes Pisces what it is, okay? So, anywho, this is coming through the 9th house. This is always going to be the first house. Doesn't matter whose natal chart you're looking at, doesn't matter what house system you're using, the first house is always going to be right here. And it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. This is always going to be the 12th house. It always has to go in that order. So up here, and if you're on a big enough device, you could probably see there's little numbers right here. This is 8, here's a 9. Okay, the 9th house, this is the house of higher learning, advanced knowledge, house of philosophy. A lot of people who have, when they're born, okay, yeah, this Anon guy might be a drug addict, but he's probably very highly intelligent and very well could end up being like a professor of the history of spirituality. You know, I'm just coming up with stuff in my head right here, because again, this is sign of Pisces is very much associated with spirituality, but it's coming through the house of higher learning. Being a lot of times people who are born with their sun in the 9th house, they, especially if they don't have anything in the 6th house, they get bored in regular old public school. Because they like to expand the consciousness, okay? But the only reason we know that the sun would come through the 9th house is because we know what time Anon was born. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit this. I'm going to go to edit the house calculations. Oh no, I got to do it the other way. Hold on, sorry. We've got to go to edit the chart data, and we will say a sunrise chart, because we don't know what time, pretending like we don't know what time this person was born. Then boom, all of a sudden everything changes. The sun is still at 14 degrees Pisces, and here's Neptune still going to be right next to the sun. Everything is still going to be in the exact same zodiac sign and in the same degree, so on and so forth. But we don't know what house it would land in, because we don't know what time Anon was born. So this is something called a natural house system, which this is putting the sun right here, where the sun would be rising. Okay, this is calculating basically from the time that the sun was rising that morning on that very specific day. What did I put? March 4th of 2020. Hopefully, if they're born in 2020, they're not a drug addict yet. But okay, so right on this would probably be around, if it's March, should probably be around 7 o'clock in the morning. That this system just naturally does that. Okay. And you can work with this. You really, really can work with this, especially once you're getting kind of deep and starting to look at transits. I have plenty of clients that don't know what time they were born. And, you know, there's a lot of things we can do, but it's definitely really, really cool if you do know what time you were born, because then you can see again, which house in your natal chart anything astrological is going on through. Now, let me just check the chat in case anybody's got any questions here. Yeah, exactly. The addicted to mysticism is actually exactly how I feel about this chart. Okay, so, and by the way, Nathan, thank you so much for keeping the chat busy. I appreciate it. Okay, so what I'm going to do real quick here is we're going to go back to Mehmet. Are you still using Placidus for the most part?
What when I look at charts?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that, do you know what it is? Because that's just the default thing I like learnt with. I've just like stuck with that. But at the end of the day, if you can read a chart, you can read it whatever the setting is, because obviously if you know what the houses means and what the planets mean, and you can still read it. So yeah, but it's just generally I always use Placidus because I always have, but not because it's better or worse. It's just because that's what I learned with. But I do know that obviously, because we spoke about this recently and I've done a bit of research on the different house systems. The whole house system is actually one of the more original systems like that the Greeks used, and then Placidus came later and it's more based on time, that like for example, it's more based on like each house, like the sun taking 2 hours to go through each house, but the houses are different sizes because of the arc it's doing through the sky is different. So that's where the difference is basically, but that's quite technical stuff. I don't want to get off subject.
Yeah. No, well, from my understanding, the whole sign house system is the ancient form. That's what ancient astrologers were working with. And I'll show you guys the difference in just a minute here. And from my understanding, it was the monks who came out with the Placidus system. And I don't know what year that was, but it's like I said, I support either of them. And Nathan has something to say. I want to get to that in just a second here. But before I forget, from my experience, and again, there's some people who are going to get this and this might go over some people's heads, but that's okay. We learn step by step. What my experience is when it comes to what I call the natal chart analysis, when I'm just looking at right here, I'm looking at a natal chart. I think especially if the sun and or the north and south nodes switch houses between Placidus and whole sign, if I'm giving the person the natal chart analysis, as long as I feel they can handle it, because some people are like, they get overwhelmed by me pointing stuff out to them like that. So I just try to balance it out for people. But if it's somebody who I feel like they can get it, what I'm trying to show them, I'll show them both. The house system, the Placidus house system, if I say their sun's coming through the 9th using Placidus, but then it pops into the 10th using whole sign, I show them both and I describe both. But then when it comes to transits and progressions, even for myself, I'm at the point where I barely even look at Placidus anymore, specifically for transits. Is that interesting? Like I've noticed that the whole sign house system for transits and progressions, it to me, it's showed itself more accurately, specifically for transits, but not to rule it out. That's just what I normally function with here. But then going back to just describing a person based on their natal chart, I like to look at both for sure. Okay, Nathan, what do you got to say?
I'm just curious if you or anyone else is open to share your perspective on, what if the soul print, like for this example that's up, that it's above, right, that midline, as to where is it it's not always just black and white, far as like if all the planets are oriented up, right, in that upper part, that they'll be more outgoing out in the world, extrovert, for example. And then, in contrast of like my chart, where it's like majority of the planets are like below. What is people's perspectives, if you're open to share how you orient that?
A really good question, because that's another thing that you can help figure out what time somebody was born, based on, especially this right here it's called a bowl. Okay, when somebody's born with what it looks like a bowl, like everything's on one side, that's called a bowl. First of all, what that means is a lot of people are born with a chart where everything's basically on one half of the chart. And just to be clear, for the people who are really new here, they could be, I mean, almost, I think you absolutely have to have empty houses at some point, but some people will only have like 1 or 2 empty houses, and everything's spread out through the whole chart. Some people will be born with everything squeezed into one little corner of the chart. Some people will be born with everything on the bottom, everything on the top. But what Nathan's saying is that, so this made up person, everything's at the top here. Even though Pisces is generally more of a introverted kind of energy who needs alone time, this person might be actually pretty extroverted, because their sun, this is called a day chart, their sun is at the top of the chart. And in fact, if I switch back into the whole sign house system, watch what happens here. Now it's even further up. And here's the midheaven. Again, if I'm saying stuff that's going over people's head, I really do apologize, but other people who know what I'm talking about here. Here's the midheaven. We're using that whole sign house system. Here's the midheaven, which rules, that's the like career point. That's the recognition, status, career. That's only 5 degrees away from the sun over here. So even though this person's a Pisces, especially conjunct Neptune, I still feel like they'd be a little extroverted. And they could be like a professor at a, some sort of higher learning school. I don't know, mysticism, mystery school, something like that. Versus if I go in and edit this, edit the chart data to be born, let's just put 11:40 p.m. Boom, now everything's down here. Okay, well, not everything, but this is actually a good example for me to go deeper here. So most of the things are down here. This person would be a little bit more introverted, a little bit not necessarily super comfortable out. They still have their moon and their north node up here in the 9th house, so they might still kind of have a tendency to be a little more introvert, extrovert sort of thing, but probably mostly introvert. Okay, now just like that, if somebody's born with almost everything on this side of the chart, they tend to be much more about spending time with other people. Their effort goes towards other people, relationships, usually something that's more like tight knit people rather than large groups of people, but they tend to forget about themselves. They tend to forget to take time for self-care if nothing's over on this side of the chart. And it just the opposite of that. If somebody's born with everything over here, they tend to be a little bit more about the self. In fact, I know quite a few people, not just clients, but very close people who are born with like almost everything in the first house, and then like a little bit in the second house and a little bit in the third. And this individual like forgets that there's other people even in the world, because this first house is the house of self. It's hilarious. It's weird too, because they're in Aquarius. Aquarius is the sign of friendships, but this individual is very much just me. It's as long as I'm happy sort of thing. It's hilarious to watch it all unfold. And that's, you know what, that's another thing to bring up here. This is like probably one of my top #1 favorite things about astrology, is it helps make sense as to why people are the way they are. Some people are going to be incredibly emotional and very, they need time alone and just bawl their eyes out. Some people like go their whole life without, having an emotional breakdown. They're just like always, like Leo conjunct Sun conjunct Mars and Leo. They just out and always happy sort of thing. And then there's some people who are just super practical. There's some people who are really good at going to work. And some people are horrible at just holding a job. Some people, mental function doesn't work. But you look at the chart and you're like, oh, you make sense of it. And you're like, this is their karma. You know, like I might be acting like an asshole over there, but now I know why. And it actually makes me have a little compassion for them. So there's that. Did that answer your question, Nathan?
Yeah, just thanks for sharing the unique perspective.
Do you have anything
Yeah,
to add to that?
Well, what I just typed in the chat was like, you know, looking at a soul print, and you know, in some ways people would be like, well, this is like the stamp of the archetype that's like embedded in my cellular structure since I was, you know, in the womb. And then also recognizing the other aspect that of being able to change or transform this soul print fate, if you will, into a destiny of the unique self, which would be to me a more refined consciousness, right?
Also, just to add to that, like we generally say that obviously planets on the top half of the chart will make someone extroverted and planets on the bottom half will make them introverted. But there's also, you can look at waxing and waning. So they say planets that are setting are, if you have like planets mainly on the right hand side of the chart, it means you're someone who is of service to others. Where if you have planets mainly on the left hand side of the chart, you're more self-centered. So there's also that side of it as well. When
Yeah.
you're kind of looking at the chart.
Yeah.
And not just up and down, you can look at it from left and right as well.
Exactly. And also what's so interesting is that taking into consideration, like I know some people who are, what's a good example? Like Capricorn or Leo or even Aries tend to be much more extroverted, much more, you know, Capricorn is the boss. Okay. But like this person with all this Capricorn energy, I mean, really, if it was more so in the fourth house over here, even though Capricorn is really good at being the boss, you know, you meet somebody and be like, oh, okay, you're a Capricorn. And again, there's so much more to the natal chart. This is a super generalization here, but oh, you got all this Capricorn energy. You're probably really good at, you know, running a business or something like that. But they got everything in here. And, you know, there's this part of them that's like, actually, I hate leaving the house. You know, maybe I could be the boss from home. I'll work from home. But it's such a trip to even sometimes those houses, in my opinion, will even override the energy of a zodiac sign, especially if it's a stellium. Okay, let's see here.
Also, Erin, what I was going to add, like, for example, that's a good example that you just used, because obviously, like, for example, you could have like the moon in the fourth house, which would be good because the moon rules in the fourth house. But then if you've got it in the sign of Capricorn, then it's like, it's, what's the word? Sorry, I'm having a brain freeze now. It's detrimented. But the moon is detrimented in Capricorn, but in the fourth house, it's strong because it rules the fourth house. So you can have kind of like a heart, it's like a 50-50. In one way, it's good, but then on the other side, it's not in the right sign. It's like, because the way I see it is you've got the moon in the right area of life, but the way you're dealing with it is with the wrong mind state, if that makes sense, because Capricorn opposes Cancer, which rules the moon.
Right.
So, like, what I'm saying is, like, there's so many variations of things that we need to take into account, like you're saying.
Yep.
Which makes us all so unique, which is why anyone with the same moon sign or the same sun sign won't be the same, because there's so many variations you got to take into place, like whether it's conjunct with something, what house it's in, is it in a strong house for that? Like, there's so many things to take into consideration, which kind of people who kind of shun astrology don't realize, and they think, oh, if all Scorpio, if you're a Scorpio, then you should all be the same. But it's a lot more complex than that, is ultimately
Totally. Like a Scorpio Leo rising is going to be very different than a Scorpio Pisces rising, or also a Scorpio. I mean, honestly, even a Scorpio who's born like October 24th versus a Scorpio born November 19th. Even just the decans are going to change a person. But then, yeah, like you said, the conjunction, like Nathan, some people would think, like Nathan pulled up his chart, allowed me to pull up his chart earlier and share it. I'm really grateful for that. It was very kind of you. But all that Scorpio energy, and somebody who's very new to astrology would think like, oh my God, this dude is so Scorpio, like everything in Scorpio. And yeah, sure he is. He's probably very, very Scorpionic. But if I remember correctly, Saturn's in Scorpio, right, Nathan? I can see your face. You just nod. Yeah. So Saturn there kind of changes it a little bit. Saturn there kind of puts a little bit more of a stiffness to the Scorpionic energy. And what we talked about earlier, I think Molly was the one who brought it up, is like bringing the lessons. The Saturn definitely brings some pretty tough lessons, but having any zodiac sign, I mean, like Pisces, you know, Pisces. But if you're Pisces and you're born with your sun right next to Saturn, again, like perfect example, you're not going to be the average Pisces. You're going to be much more like centered and grounded, and, you know, have to go about, you know, might even be a little bit more restricted with the way you share your energy, that sort of thing. Okay, so let's see here.
Can I say something about this?
Yeah, hi.
So hi, I don't think you guys can see me. I'm driving. I'm almost to my mom, so I'm gonna have to bounce out. But it's the dispositor is very important, and it's, you know, astrology is so much math, and that means order of operations. And the first order of operations is sect. Is it a daytime or a nighttime? So if the planet itself, like Saturn and Jupiter, you know, they want to be up at the top of the chart. So when you have the guy that we're talking about, sorry, the Scorpio, I forgot your name, sorry already. Anyways, his Saturn's in Scorpio, it's at the bottom of the chart, it's in the dark, Saturn. So you get the dark qualities or the colder qualities because Saturn likes to be at the top of the chart. So that's sect. So the first thing that we consider is sect. The second thing we consider is dignities. So, and then the third thing we consider is aspects, you know, so like when the planet is out of sect, it's going to have a harder time. So when you have Saturn's down in the cold, Saturn's already cold and contracting. So when you have it down in the bottom half of the chart where it's cold, it's double cold, you know, it's double slow, it's double contracted. But if Saturn is like, so if his wheelhouse is oriented that he had Saturn in Pisces, which he does in the top of the chart where Saturn is comfortable, you know, that's going to shine a different light on it. So the first consideration that, you know, that I learned is about sect status. And then after that, we have dignity status, you know, so like for him using his chart again, he's got, you know, Mars is disposited, Mars rules Scorpio, right? So Mars is disposited in the 12th house. So number one, we've got Mars is out of sect. Mars is so hot, it needs to be in the bottom of chart. So he's got the dispositor up at the top of the chart. So that's like, okay, it's too hot, right? Not to say that it's too hot, but just these are conditions he's going to deal with. On top of that, it's in the 12th house. On top of that, it's Mars, who's the baby, in the 12th house of Virgo, which is the mother. So see, that's, and then we're going to get, then after that, we're going to apply order operations. We're going to apply aspects to that. So, fortunately, Mars, even though it's in the 12th house, it's the top of the chart, it is in an earth sign, and earth and water flow together better. So that's like that's a consideration that works in his benefit because his Scorpio is a water sign, right? So that's an important thing. You understanding the sect, understanding first, and because how is that planet doing has a lot to do with it, and where it's disposited at will, you know, help determine the sect status. And then and then the like I said, and then the dignity status, and then the aspects. And then with the aspects, we requalify it with, you know, which term and decan or face it's in too. That's how I think about it. And then you have certain, you know, certain outer planets. It's like if something's like, if Saturn's right on the sun, like he has pretty much, or, you know, Neptune's right on the moon, if you got those outer planets on any of your sun, moon, or rising, that's going to be a big trumper too, you know. So that was one thing that I wanted to say about all that.
Thanks for that addition. Yeah.
And
it's hard to, I mean, I understand exactly what you're saying, but I feel like for some people, it's probably really hard for them to see without the chart in front of them, you know. That'd be great if we were able to, but I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah, and because it's order of operations, and we have to like qualify what, you know, what status things are in. When Saturn's down in the dark, when it wants to be cold, up at the heat. So even if it's domicile, like say Saturn's in Capricorn, but hush, bubbly, we just got to my mom, she's like, let me out of here. But even if Saturn has dignity in Capricorn, because Saturn rules Capricorn, but it's in the bottom half of the chart where it's cold, that's going to put a bit of a kibosh on it, you know. Another thing I want to say is that, you know, we can always use horary to determine somebody's you know, at least their, you know, first house. And horary chart is where you would just ask a question. It's almost like drawing an I Ching. You just ask a question about anything, you build a chart around that. So that's something that we can use. And also checking where people's Saturn cycles are, like what happened to you at age 7. That also helps us determine the first house.
Totally. Yeah.
But I love you guys. Thank you so much. I'm still going to try to listen in, but my family's probably going to take over, but I'm going to stay on as much as I can. So I'm going to bow out.
I think I'll probably, I mean, we're almost on 2 hours here. So I was thinking like another 20 minutes or so. I was going to go into, I mean, unless you guys are like, don't go. I might just have to let my dog go potty in 20 minutes or so. If you guys want to remain on the call, we can do that. But yeah, thanks for that contribution, Molly. What I didn't really go through, I was talking about how to see which area of people's life this eclipse is really activating, what area of your life it's going to be triggering. So again, as long as you know approximately what time you were born, then just go to, again, any website, anything to, and let's see, I think it was Art sent me his natal chart. I think a couple other people did, but I'm trying to stay somewhat focused here. Just look for, okay, here is the symbol for Aries, and if it's going to look slightly different depending on what software you're using or what website you're using, but it should be recognizable. The only one that tends to kind of get a little shifty is Capricorn's glyph right here. Capricorn sometimes is almost hard to recognize, but Aries, that's the ram. It represents, in fact, Aries rules the top of the head, and that is really representing the energy coming out through the top of the head. It's the cardinal fire sign. Aries can have a tendency to overexert themselves because the energy goes flying out through the top of the head. But, okay, you want to look to see which house in your natal chart. Let's start with sign of Aries. We'll go through Taurus as well. But for some people, the sign of Aries could be over here. It 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 could be anywhere. Okay. So I'm going to go through these houses. And by the way, while I'm on that, what Mehmet brought up earlier when he was talking about like if somebody has an Aries stellium, you can connect that to the first house. What he's talking about, there's 12 zodiac signs, just like there's 12 houses. Okay, and in fact, let's switch back over into a natural chart just so I can show you guys this little trick here. It's not necessarily technically what you're supposed to work with, but it's a good little cheat sheet. Okay, house, oh no, yeah, let's go house calculations and go with natural. That should put it there. Okay, now. Aries, now it's over here. Here's a symbol for Aries. And by the way, that's one of the reasons I love time passages, because for those of you who know what I'm talking about, I like looking at the decans, or sometimes pronounced deacons. And I love that time passages shows you the cut, like this is red because it's a fire sign. This is green because it's an earth sign. This is yellow because it's an air sign. This is blue because it's a water sign. It makes it really easy to see the decans real quick. Oh, again, sorry if that goes over anybody's head, but anywho, Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, and it's the sign of self. With that said, in a natural chart, which is what we just did here, we use a natural chart often if we don't know what time somebody was born. Again, there's all kinds of ways to go about this if you don't know what time somebody was born. But it falls into a natural house system. Aries falls in the first house. That's its own home, because Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. It loves being the first house. The first house, this little slice of pie, is the house of self. Okay, every single person, their rising sign has to come through the first house. That's what rules for when you do know what time you were born, then you're able to see your rising sign and you're able to see your house system moving forward. But it's this first house, it rules over basically our whole life. It's our house of infancy. It's our house. It's the most important house of our natal chart because it rules over ourself. Okay, so with that said, if you're looking at your natal chart, and maybe I can go back, I think I might have closed it. I think it was Art who sent. If you are happy to chime in and let me know, or if you want to send. Yes. Do you want to send me yours again so I can actually just tell you? I mean, I'm not going to pull your chart up unless you want me to, but sure. I can tell you which.
Let me send it to you.
Okay, let's see. Oh. I saw it earlier, but I got too much stuff open on my screen now. So let's see.
You got it now.
There we go. Okay, I see it. All right. So this is Art. Okay, so let's see. Aries is gonna. You got a Placidus house system here, which is totally okay. So this, interestingly, Art, do you mind if I pull your chart up?
Not at all. Please do.
Okay. Well, I think I might, but I'm going to get sidetracked if I jump around too much. But for you, Art, the first new moon in Aries would have been coming through your 7th house. The second new moon in Aries would be coming through your 8th house because you're using a Placidus house system. If you were using a whole sign house system, then it would all come through your 8th house. So using the system that you're working with here, this specific solar eclipse is mostly going to be activating your 8th house, which is the house of transformation. There's also going to be some energy coming through your 9th house, which is the house of higher learning. Okay. And I'll explain to you why. Okay. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked, but I was just thinking about maybe using arts for, there we go. Okay. Using that as an example, but let's quickly go through what these houses are. So when you're looking at your chart, you know what to look for. Okay. So here's the first house. Again, it's the house of self. Second house. This is the house of money, material possessions, values, can also have a huge influence on consumption, consuming food or purchasing things. Just like when I was talking about the sign of Taurus earlier, this, again, I've got a natural house system set up here. So here's the symbol or the glyph for the sign of Taurus. Taurus is the sign of money, material possessions, values, consumption. Okay. So it's the second sign of the zodiac is going to be associated with the second house. So with that said, if you're looking at your natal chart and you happen to see that symbol for the sign of Aries, again, we're talking about the new moon in Aries coming up. So we're just going to focus on that sign of Aries for now. If you see Aries coming through your second house, you know it's time for new beginnings right now with this solar eclipse. You know it's a time for new beginnings, and those new beginnings have to do with your own money, material possessions, values, or what you are consuming. Okay. Third house, this is the house of communication. Can have to do with networking, but it's actually can be very much associated with like authoring or journaling or being a journalist. Any kind of verbal or written communication could come through this third house. The third house can also have an influence on our mental function, but also can oddly be applied to our siblings. If there's something going on with siblings and your third house is getting activated with this new moon, if the sign of Aries is coming through your third house, you know, it's a time for new beginnings about anything I'm just talking about here that for yourself that can be applied to communication, siblings. This third house can also have to do with short distance travels. Like, let me think of it. And a good example here would be, okay, let's see here. I'm really sick and tired of having to drive to the store every single day. what I'm going to manifest is a silly manifestation, but whatever, it works because it's a sign of that it's coming through the sign of Aries, which is the sign of self. So it's about you. And Aries wants to be aggressive. Okay, I'm sick and tired of driving to the store, the 10-minute drive every single day. What I'm going to set my intentions for this new moon is instead of making all these silly little trips all the time, I'm going to go to the grocery store once. I'm actually going to have a list, so I buy everything at once. That kind of thing can also be applied to the third house. So again, any kind of communication, verbal, written, or can also be applied to networking or mental function or siblings or yeah, okay, hopefully you guys got it. And again, let me know if you have questions. Okay, fourth house. This is the house of home. Home, family, property, real estate can have to do with either parents. This is why we're talking about when somebody's born with this stuff down here, like if somebody in their natal chart has a bunch of stuff down here in the fourth house, they tend to be very introverted. They tend to like to be at home. Okay. All right. Fifth house. This is a fun house. This is the house of children and creativity. Now, yes, it can certainly be applied to us having children of our own, but that's because when we make children, we're procreating, we're creating something and bringing it into the world. That's what this fifth house is all about. It's about creating something and bringing it into the world. And with fun, this is really like the house of life's pleasures as well. The fifth house can also be applied to even entrepreneurships. A lot of people have a busy fifth house in their natal chart, will be really good at creating their own business. Okay, especially in a fun way. Okay, also this fifth house can have to do with sexual pleasures as well. Eighth house can also be applied to sexual energy, but that's more like the intensity of sexual energy. The fifth house is more like fun, playful stuff. Okay. And also anybody, Nathan, Mehmet, Mirri, Hank, anybody who knows anything about astrology, if I missed something, please take yourself off mute and say, hey, Erin, there's also more you could say about that house. Okay, sixth house. This is the house, really the house of health, like physical health and being of service. Okay, so again, if that Aries energy is coming through your sixth house, then this could be about new beginnings for yourself, because it's coming through the sign of Aries, sign of self, in a warrior type of way. Let's say all of a sudden you're like, I need to take better care of my physical health. And this new moon is coming through my house of physical health. I'm setting the intention now. And by the way, just so I don't forget to say this as well, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not like you write in your journal, I am manifesting new beginnings with, physical health. It's not like you wake up the next morning and all of a sudden like, boom, I'm crazy healthy all of a sudden and everything was easy. It takes to work, but writing it down, that's what puts the energy into action. You're casting the spells by spelling it out. Okay. Also, the sixth house can have to do with being of service. In any way, a lot of people who are born with a bunch of stuff coming through their sixth house. They hold any kind of service job, anything from a bartender to a mechanic, or even anything that they're being of service in some way. Sometimes it's not even through a job, but they just help people a lot. Okay. They watch other people's kids or whatever it is. Okay. Seventh house. This is a house of relationships. Yes, definitely can be applied to romantic relationships, but it can also be applied to any kind of one-on-one relationship. In fact, this can very much, if you're somebody who takes clients, or if you're a doctor, you take patients, or let's say you have a business where you take customers, the relationship, the one-on-one relationship, even though it's, the relationship that you have with Jeff and with Josie and with Mary and Bob, they're all customers, they're all clients, they're all patients, they're all friends. It's not the group of them, it's the individual relationships with each one of them. That's the seventh house. A lot of people who are born with stuff in the seventh house could be really good at taking clients or patients or customers. Okay, but also can very much be applied to romantic relationships for sure. Okay, so eighth house. This is the house of transformation, the house of death and rebirth. This area of the chart is very, very intense, just like that sign of Scorpio. Scorpio's the eighth sign of the zodiac, so it's associated with the eighth house. We're talking about way in the beginning of the call. The sign of Scorpio is the most intense sign of the zodiac. As I mentioned, it rules the excretory system where things flush out, but for the purpose of embracing a new, powerful new beginning, being ruled by Pluto and Mars. Okay, again, Pluto rules the spiritual drive, where Mars rules the physical drive. That's this very eighth house. It's a combination of the spiritual drive and the physical drive. Okay, and again, this can also have to do with sexual energy, but more of the intensities that come with that. Okay, the ninth house. This is a house of higher learning, advanced knowledge. We kind of already touched on this ninth house. It can have a lot to do with wisdom, even like metaphysics. Again, expanding the consciousness, higher learning, anything that has to do with that. So also this ninth house can have to do with long distance travels. Like a lot of people are born with a bunch of energy coming through their ninth house. They end up traveling across the seas all the time. And then usually those long distance travels have to do with a process of expanding the consciousness or learning things, of embracing wisdom through their travels. Okay, the 10th house is the house of career, public life, status, recognition. If you got Aries coming through that 10th house, now's your time. If you want to manifest, more success with the career, now's the time, especially before that North Node hits into Aries in July. Okay, 11th house. This is the house of associates and hopes and wishes. This can also have to do with networking with people. A little bit more of like on a broad spectrum, kind of that sort of networking. Humanitarianism can be associated with this 11th house. A lot of people say when they got their sun in this 11th house, they like doing things in groups of people, or they are hanging out with all the people they work with, that sort of thing. So the sign of Aries coming through your 11th house, manifest new beginnings, have to do with the sign of Aries, the warrior type energy, but through groups of people or networking of sorts. Okay, 12th house. So the 12th house, this is the house, the house of karma, a house of spiritual debt, sometimes referred to as the house of secrets and sorrows, but it's also referred to as the house of punishments and rewards. Meaning, let's say for a second here, this is somebody's real natal chart, and they were born with their sun and Neptune in here in this 12th house. A lot of times, I think actually this person might be all right. It's aspected really nicely. As long as they were on a strong, good spiritual journey, this person would be all right. But a lot of people have their sun and something very prominent in this 12th house. Sometimes life can be hard for them. It's like, why is everything so much easier for that person than it is for me? I just keep getting knocked down. But those people, if they, just give up on life and they're like, this is too hard for me. I give up on life because it's too hard. Then the punishments tend to be much more severe when it's a 12th house involvement. But on the flip side of that, if those people who life was not easy for them and they are like, I got this, I got to keep raising my vibration, I got to keep going after this, I got to stay positive, then the rewards can be greater than they would be in other areas of the zodiac. Okay, that's the punishments and rewards. This 12th house can be sorrowful. It can bring up things like secrets. Let's say that you got Aries, if you're if you got Aries coming through your 12th house, this would be a really good idea to manifest new beginnings, be a warrior with overcoming the karmic challenges. Or this 12th house is definitely the most spiritual house of the zodiac. I want to manifest strong spiritual practices that help me overcome the hard karmic challenges. Okay. Also, the 12th house can have to do with sleep too. Okay, so we got through that. Any questions on that? Okay, well then.
Sorry, Erin, did you go through house 1? I think you started at 2.
Yep, the first house is the first house, house of self. If that's what I was talking about when I was talking about the sign of Aries being the first sign of the zodiac. Aries is the sign of self. The first house is the house of self. And in fact, what I'll do here is, let's see here. How should I go about this? Let's do the house calculations and we'll go to Placidus. See, this is where things get a little interesting. Is this going to work with this one? Yeah. Okay, this will work. Now, I pulled up a Placidus house system, which is what I kind of feel like most people, because it is like Mehmet said, it's when you have a software, astrology software, go to a website, it's automatically set to Placidus. Okay, it is probably the more commonly used house system. Art, like I said, yours is in Placidus, and I'll show you what I'm talking about just a minute here. But if you want to work with Placidus, which again is totally fine, I have no problem, you guys say, but Well, just like how we started over here with house one, house two, we went around the clock, just like a clock. Everything goes counterclockwise through this clock, by the way, unless it's in retrograde. But this right here, see how it's pointing out where it's red? This right here is the Aries energy. Aries is a fire sign, so it's red. Again, here's the glyph for the sign of Aries. What we see now is a little bit of this Aries energy is coming through the 4th house, but it ends in the 5th house. It's kind of self-explanatory. The whole sign house system puts the whole sign in each house. Okay, and I'm happy to go into depth on that, but I kind of feel like I don't want to take up too much of your guys' time here today. Let's do this again. We'll do this again. I'm going to put together another one of these things. Okay, but if you are using Placidus, think about the fact that it starts over here. Everything starts over here, 1st house, and moves forward. That means that where this red energy is, that's 0 degrees Aries. That's the very, very beginning of the sign of Aries. Over here, this is the end of the sign of Aries. This is 30 degrees Aries, okay? So with that said, like I was mentioning way earlier in the beginning of the call, we had a new moon in the sign of Aries at 0 degrees. What was it? I can't remember the date right now, about a month ago, 3-4 weeks ago. That was right here. The new moon hit right here versus this next new moon in Aries is at 29 degrees Aries. So it's over here at the end of the sign of Aries. So with that said, using this Placidus house system, we see, okay, the first new moon in Aries for Anon sunshine came through his 4th house, his house of home. So if this Anon sunshine was an astrologer, he'd be like, all right, cool. He's using Placidus. For the new moon in Aries that we had a little while back at 0 degrees, he'd be thinking, okay, I want to manifest new beginnings, warrior type energy. I'm going after this, but in my home, I'm manifesting a new home. Let's say he wants to buy a piece of property. Okay. He writes that down because that energy comes through his 4th house. But then this new moon in Aries is way the heck over here at the end of the sign of Aries, which that's coming through his 5th house. So then he could be like, okay, manifesting these warrior type energies coming through. I want to entrepreneur something. I want to create something, or I want to start painting. I want to create whatever it is. I want to create it. He would apply it to that area of his chart, the 5th house, using this Placidus thing. Okay, now also take into consideration that the North Node is also in the sign of Taurus. That's where energy is coming in with this eclipse. So I would also take into consideration, if you're really you really want to figure out which area of your life this is coming through for you, I would apply it to whatever house the sign of Aries and the sign of Taurus is coming through. If you're doing Placidus, then you need to see exactly where 29 degrees Aries is and 4 degrees Taurus is and apply it to those houses in your chart. That's my strongest recommendation. Okay, I got something in the chat here. Okay. Oh, thank you, Ivan. Thank you so much. Okay, so if you are totally brand new to this, I get it. This might be super overwhelming. Yes, Nathan, please speak up.
I would love in the future if you'd be open to consider doing one on the mythology. I think that's a great idea and something that I love studying myself, like the mythology, of the glyphs. Oh
yeah, because I'm actually not that up to par on that stuff. I've studied it a little bit more so when I first started getting in, because the American Federation School of Astrologers, we had to understand the basics of it. And I do understand that's like the whole is the sun and then the crescent moon. It's like energy coming in, receiving, right? Sort of thing. I would love to go into that. And then Jupiter, he expands. So he's like opening up. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Remind me of your name again. Conscious Minds TV. You were mentioning earlier. Mehmet?
Yeah.
Mehmet was mentioning the Greeks, and a majority of what I've learned about that mythology is coming from that Greek mythology and Bacchus, going back to there.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different ways you could break it down. Like, for example, the way that someone broke down, like, for example, let me look at one of the symbols. So like for example, if you look at Venus, it has a cross, which is a symbol of Earth, and then it has a circle. So it's like two symbols in one. That's what someone taught me about when you start looking at the symbols for each planet. So it's like particular elements are joined to make one particular symbol. But the way, there's so many different ways you could break down each of these planets through different mythologies, whether it's like the Vedic or the Greek, or there's so many different ways you could break it down, like when it comes to the mythology of the signs and stuff like that, and like Aries, for example, being the lamb and like the sacrifice, like connecting with Jesus and the Lamb of God. That's a whole another, that there's so much on that.
Yeah, and also I think Nathan, your chart was showing the more ancient version of the glyph for Pluto. Like this is Pluto right here, where I'm moving my mouse.
Yeah, I see it.
What was it? Your Pluto, the glyph is different on yours, isn't it?
It was just the P. Yeah, it was just
that's the more, I think I could have that. And Mirri or Hank, if you guys are still on the call, you guys know more about that stuff than I do. Please feel free to chime in. But for mine, I think that what is on your chart is the more ancient glyph for Pluto, and this is more of a modern one, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But I'm totally game to do that because, again, it's constant stimulation, and this is how I get it. Talking about
that current one, I think I remember seeing in one of Jeffrey Wolfgreen's book. He does I think it's called Evolutionary Astrology, but he kind of breaks it apart of those three symbols as well. The current Pluto one that's referenced here on the screen, that it's the sun and the cross and then the U.
Yeah, I'm totally game to do that for sure. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is, because Art sent me, and Art, can I get a definite confirmation you're okay with me pulling your chart up?
Absolutely, sure.
Fantastic. Okay, so what I'm gonna, because he's got another, this is basically the only reason I want to show you guys this is because I want to show you that there's all these different, it's going to look slightly different depending on what software or just website you're using. Okay, so here we have another example where it looks slightly different, but at the same time, it's always going to be a circle. Okay, that's the zodiac. He's got the houses. Here's the first house, the second house, the third house. Okay, all that's still going to stay exactly the same. Now, okay, how deep should I go here? This is to represent the rising sign. We kind of went over this earlier. Oh, wow. You got Pluto and Uranus really on your moon. My goodness. I got to give you a reading, Art. There's something about Pluto on the ascendant that's, it's like scorpionic, really. Okay. So for what I was talking about with Art's chart, again, it looks slightly different. Now we see that this is the first house, second house, third house, fourth house. We see the houses. Here's the seventh house right here. Again, here's that number 7. Here, right here is to represent the very beginning of the sign of Aries. Again, we had a 0 degrees Aries new moon. That was our last new moon. Okay, that would have been right here and come through Art's 7th house, because that part of the sign of Aries lands in the 7th house. Now, this new moon in Aries would come through 29 degrees Aries, which is up here, and it comes through the 8th house. So this new moon solar eclipse is, for you, the whole darn thing is activating, if you're using this house system, is activating your 8th house, which is the house of transformation, the house of death and rebirth. Like, what do you want to let go of so that you can make room for more powerful new beginnings? Okay. Now, if we were to switch, and I can't do that with this because it's just an image, but if you have software or a website, you should be able to switch between, like just go to the preference settings and you should be able to change it from Placidus to whole sign and just kind of check it out, play around with it. But if this were a whole sign house system, this would come through. What would happen here is this sign of Aries right here would all be in the 8th house. It would all, because that's why it's called a whole sign house system. We know that the sign of Aries rules his 8th house because this right here is the cusp of the 8th house and it's falling into the sign of Aries. Now, if I switched it into a whole sign house system, this whole sign of Aries would plop, land itself into the 8th house. Okay. And then with that said, that sign of Taurus would actually then pop on into his 9th house. This is the cusp of the 9th house. Okay. And it's ruled by Taurus. Here's this Taurus energy. The whole sign of Taurus would then go into the 8th house. So it would actually be activating, because the North Node is in Taurus, I would say, as your astrologer, Art, that this new moon total solar eclipse is mostly activating the 8th house, which is the house of transformation, the house of death and rebirth. But it's also, and in fact, starting in July of this year, your 9th house is about to get highly activated. The house of higher learning, the house of, wisdom, the house of long distance travel, the house of expansion, the house of, all kinds of philosophy, metaphysics, that sort of thing. So there's that. Thanks for letting me share this, Art. Okay, now does anybody else have any other questions they want to add to this?
No, I was just going to say, it's interesting in that last chart how his nodes are kind of they're kind of going to be inverse. So like,
I didn't.
Taurus in the 8th house and Scorpio in the 2nd, if that makes sense. That was quite interesting looking at that.
I didn't even know. Oh, you're right.
Yeah. So it's almost like an inverse.
Yeah. That is really interesting. Okay. Good point. Good point. I love working with other astrologers, so they point things out that I wouldn't noticed. Okay. Anybody else want to add anything to that? Anybody want desperately to stick around and not end this call? Anything you want to add to this? Whatever, other than let my dog out to go pee. I don't got to do anything.
Can I just add something, Erin?
Anything you want.
Yeah, I was just going to say, going back to when Erin was talking about the houses, the way I like to kind of teach people or to tell an easy way to remember it is like each house has like a motto. So like a one-liner. So that way you can remember what each house is and each sign is. So for example, like Aries is I am, Taurus is I have, Gemini is I think, Cancer is I feel, Leo is I create, Virgo is I serve, Libra is I balance, Scorpio would be I desire or I transform, Sagittarius I see, Capricorn I use, Aquarius I know, and Pisces I believe. So if you kind of because astrology, like Erin was saying, is quite an intense thing. So if you learn it through these little basic key points, then you can kind of just build upon it. And I think that's a good foundation you can use to understand, because it's like you're doing two things at once. You're understanding the sign and the house at the same time. That's all I was going to add.
That's a really good point. The mottos are a really good, quick little key word to stick with there. And there, if you can memorize them. And that's something else I want to add too, is that if you are super new to this and it feels intimidating or overwhelming, just take one little thing at it. Like if you want to learn this stuff, but it can seem overwhelming. Just do one thing at a time. Start with understanding each. So in my opinion, I think it's a good idea to just start with understanding the energy of each zodiac sign. as you meet people, hopefully they're willing to share, you know, if you're like, oh, you know, what's your zodiac sign? I know for some people, they feel like that's corny. To me, I don't care. I'll ask the guy at the register, the, you know, grocery store, what's your sign? And then feel into it and see if you could start to notice people's, you know, unique differences. And that's where I always recommend starting. And then, you know, like Mehmet just went through the mottos, is all this stuff can be found online. And if you want to go to school for this, I don't, this is so terrible. I don't recommend going to the American Federation School of Astrologers unless you want for sure to be an astrologer, because that shit is hard. It's, I mean, you have to learn how to manually calculate a natal chart, which that's the hardest thing. I mean, mechanically, or making my brain just, I cried trying to, you know, there's pages after pages of calculations. So I don't recommend that if this is something you just kind of want to learn. But then, you know, the Academy for Astrological Medicine, that's more of a medical based school, but that's Judith's school. And she, you know, she'll teach the basics. In fact, she's putting out a new class for the basics. But you can also just watch YouTube videos, or, you know, whatever it takes. Software delegation. Got it. Thanks, Nathan. Yeah. Okay, you guys. All right. Does anybody have anything else they want to add to this before I end the call? We're good. I'm seeing, oh, thanks, Jeffrey. Thank you so much, Art, for sharing your chart, everything. And thank you, Bridget. That was really nice to have you here. Thank you, all of you, for being here. I had no idea how this was going to go. And it was like such a random idea. But like I said, I want to be available. Like some of you guys are just, you know, leaving comments on my YouTube channel. I'm like, who is this? Let's meet. Let's talk. Let's find out what's going on with each other. So this was a really good time. And like I said, I'll just keep your eyes out, and I'll be putting out some more opportunities for this. Okay. Okay, you guys, thanks again so much. You guys
Thank
Peace,
you,
everyone.
Thank you very much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.